Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getItinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is Adam Moseley. He is a producer, engineer, educator, technology geek. Yep. I'm going to cheat and read off some of your credits here, and then we'll just get into a little bit of...
I appreciate you reminding me. Some of them,
what do I do?
Yeah, some of them have been a long time.
The main thing here, and we're going to get into this in a moment, but you began your career at the infamous Trident Studios. Yeah. Some credits here, and I've got this off of your website and whatnot. It's a really interesting list, actually. Let's see here. U2, Lenny Kravitz, Prince, John Cale, Richard Marx, The Cure, Rush, Kiss, The Blow Monkeys, The Buggles, Tina Turner, Michael Brecker, Earth, Wind & Fire, and my personal favorite, Hoagy Carmichael.
Yeah, that was a crazy album, seriously.
As well as a bunch of film credits, including True Blood and The Big Wedding, among many others. But, yeah, let's start with Trident.
Okay.
Because Trident is obviously where you cut your teeth, but it's also, it's no doubt really intrinsic to your career development and everything. You started there in the late 70s.
Yeah, 1978. Moved to London to try and get a band to work because I had a band in my hometown Brighton and we were crap, so I thought I need to be in a bigger town. Moved to London, there'll be lots of choice. Moved to London, put a band together, we were still crap.
Well, wherever you go, there you are, right?
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. So I realised it wasn't necessarily the town that I was in. Maybe it was more personal. And I thought, my dad was a jazz musician. I'd grown up with vinyl, new vinyl nearly every day, and probably the first things I was reading was the back of vinyl covers. And I knew that the producer was the big name on the back, So I thought, he must be the guy that knows how to do this, so I'll become one of them. And then I can become a rock star,
So your aspiration then was never really technical. It was production from the artistic perspective.
Or being a musician. Yeah, until I had to accept that I sucked.
Well, we all have to accept that, even the good ones.
Yeah, and then I realized that I was better building a career of telling people what to play rather than trying to play it myself. So that was my thing. I had no technical background. I failed all my sciences at school. The only thing I was good at was languages, which I guess is artistic. Languages to me were like music. They were just series of notes, inflections, nuances.
That's why a lot of musicians are very good with accents and learning languages, because we can emulate those sounds so well.
Yeah, we recognize patterns. So that was it. So I'd gone to law school to get to London. After a year at law school, I thought, nah, this isn't working. I quit. I was a driver for my uncle in the women's fashion business for 6 months, writing letters to studios, wrote 100 letters, and got one interview. Knew nothing about the studio at all. Trident in St. Anne's Court in Soho, London. Went for the interview, said to the manager, he said, why did you write? I said, well, I wonder if you've got any jobs going as a record producer. That was his reaction. He said, well, do you know anything about the studio? I said, no, not really. He said, well, a few people have done okay from here, but I see on your letter you wrote me that you've worked on construction sites and you can cook. I'd worked in restaurants. I'd taken a year off before uni. I'd gone to live in Sweden. I worked on construction sites to make money so I could go. And in Sweden, I worked in restaurants. So came back and he said, well, I see that. And I said, yeah. He said, okay, we're enlarging the main control room. We're going 48 track, which they called 46. To be polite, I'm fed up, he said, buying takeout food for 15 people every night. So I can hire you. You'll do construction from 9 a.m. in the morning. At 4 in the afternoon, come to me. There's a 4-ring stove on the top floor, electric stove, 15 people. I want you to tell me how much petty cash you need, go down the markets, buy the food, cook for 15 people, 3-course meals, serve up, clean up, and when you're done, you can go back to construction till 3 a.m., back at 9, 6 days a week. And I'll pay you 20 quid a week. £20 a week.
Ooh.
And I thought, I get paid?
Wow. That's a long day, though.
Yeah, for 3 months, 6 days a week.
Ouch.
And I didn't know what would happen at the end of that. You know, if that was that thank you, goodbye. But I got, at the end of the 3 months, I got promoted to being a T-boy, which, so I actually found a level which was lower than T-boy to get in, where the T-boys gave me crap all day.
Yeah, not to mention just, as I say, a long day and a very tiring day. I mean, that's a lot of...
Yeah, the best bit was after cooking and serving up and then cleaning, when like my skin was all greasy and the pores were open, then I had to go back to putting the rock wool in the walls. Just yeah. My bed was just like fiberglass for months. Horrible stuff.
Yeah. Of course, you only slept, what, 4 hours a night or so?
Yeah, itching away.
Yeah, nice. So, 1978, what was going on in that studio at that point?
It was initially, Trident had been like the great rock studio from Queen, all the early Genesis, the Peter Gabriel's first 2 albums, the Beatles albums, the White Album was done there, and then George Harrison did his first 2 solos, John and Yoko. So that's kind of what was going on, and Trident, unbeknownst, was coming to the end of its rock period. So some of the first record I saw being made was Peter Gabriel 2, which is called Scratch. The one. I've got a picture of like looking down from the control room with like Tony Levin playing Chapman stick, you know, Manu Katché on drums, David Rhodes guitar, Peter. That was the first record I saw being made. The first records I started to work on, so fortunately, Mike Stone, who did the Queen albums, Mike had got into Trident, as everyone did, as a T-boy, and worked up. Everyone came there knowing nothing about anything.
Was that intentional of the
No, it was just because in England we didn't really have music schools.
Right, of course, and in that era we didn't have them here either.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's not like anyone had band at school or university, so there wasn't really any proper musical training in that sense. There was the Royal Academy that you could go to. They didn't want trained people. Why I couldn't get hired? I got 1 interview out of 100 letters because I was 20, and I'd been to law school. I spoke languages. I'd worked abroad.
Oh yeah, you were overqualified.
Yeah, and they didn't think that I would, you know, take the crap basically as starting below T-boy or even at T-boy. So that was like a real handicap. They wanted you at 15, 16, not finishing your education, and the reason was so that they could mold you in their likeness.
Of course.
And, you know, in their way. The Trident way was very different from Abbey Road, you know. Yes,
I got hired in the mid-1980s at Cherokee, and it was the exact same thing. It was, I was hired because I had no prior studio experience.
Yeah.
And they really wanted to mold me in, and I quote the person that hired me, the Cherokee way.
Yeah.
You know.
That was the same thing. I remember when the construction was done, and I was one of 12 people trying to carry the frame for the Trident A range and get it into the control room. And then they started putting these slots of like long things in, and I was looking at it and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I'm never going to understand this stuff. And I thought, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can get back into law school, you know, get a real job. But I was like overwhelmed looking at all this equipment going back in the room, and I really thought, I will never get my head around this, because I'm not essentially a technical person.
Well, and it's interesting because, you know, working in studios, we are surrounded by those people who are, I would say, more left-brained than we are, you know.
Yeah.
And God knows we need them.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time, I always find it fascinating to chat with those people, and you know, in certain ways I feel intimidated by their knowledge, but at the same time, you realize that we all have a different place in the creative process, and that's just as important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And finding that, and a real revelation of realizing after a little while that I think I could figure this out, and that this was where I was meant to be. I wasn't meant to be in a band. I was meant to be in this environment, and it was just magical. So your question, in the rock era, 1978, it meant I worked on the 4 solo Kiss albums, which Mike Stone engineered and produced.
Oh boy.
When they, yeah.
I'm sure there are stories there.
Yeah, I can say that Paul Stanley's solo album was probably the most fun I've had on a record, or some of the best fun I've had on an album. I won't comment necessarily on a couple of the others, but Paul's was good. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so 4 Kiss albums. Then my first mixing experiences when I'd gone from T-Boy, I worked up to tape-op, mm-hmm. from tape-op, senior tape-op, kind of starting to do little engineering things, then assistant engineer, then engineer, co-producer, producer. That was my path, as most people it was. With Mike Stone, he would involve me more and more, which was amazing on these albums. But the first mixing experience I had was when with Rush on the Hemispheres album, I'd been assistant tape-op, doing small little tasks on that. But then I was like an assistant engineer on Permanent Waves with Terry Brown. Neil Peart never came to the sessions once the tracking was done.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
why would he need to?
Yeah, he trusted Terry Brown, of course, why not? Mm-hmm. And Geddy and Alex to get the record finished. Neil was also often, hidden away somewhere in Canada writing the lyrics, so that's how that would work. But that was my first mixing experience when I was allowed to sit not on the little Trident Fleximix, which had been built for Queen when they were touring. It was the Trident Fleximix. We called it the FU mix. But generally at first when we'd gone 48 track there, the Trident B range in the mix room, which was an A range but just configured differently.
Yes, I always wondered about that.
Yeah, it was absolutely an A range.
Mm-hmm.
All the A range modules in it. It was just configured differently
just different workflow. Yeah.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
for mixing. Mm-hmm. But it only had 40 channels. So once we'd gone beyond 40 tracks,
you need the sidecar.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we'd have the secondary console, which was set behind, and I always felt, my first jobs were, you can be in this mix, verse 2, bar 3, tambourine pan left to right.
It's kind of like sitting at the kids' table at the meal,
That's exactly how I describe it. First of all, you had one task to do,
uh-huh.
and you were like the guy in the orchestra who has one cymbal
crash.
Right. And the closer it gets, the sweatier your palms are, and you can't even hold the thing. And mm-hmm. It would be the thing, I couldn't even hold the button because the nerves. But it really was like sitting at the kiddie table mm-hmm. at the family wedding of a mitzvah or something.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And you're sitting there but at the family event, you're looking at your other 16-year-old cousin who's sitting with the grown-ups, and you're with the 8-year-olds with your knees under your chin.
Yep.
But if you didn't screw up verse 2, bar 3, tambourine pan, mm-hmm. By bar 4, you got to sit with the grown-ups. Uh-huh. So the first time I got to sit with the grown-ups was on Rush Permanent Waves.
Was that intimidating? Did you feel... Because, everyone's got their story of being thrown in the deep end the first time. Mm. And I'm sure no matter how much we train for it, it's still nerve-wracking when it happens.
The pressure was so intense, and also, we can be honest about the lifestyle back then, which wasn't that healthy.
What?
Apparently, I saw a documentary that mentioned it, not personal experience. Being thrown in the deep end at that time, the first mixing experience, sitting on the end of the console, 10 faders with Terry Brown next to me, and then Geddy and Alex mixing Spirit of Radio in sections, in let's try and get the intro, but let's play it. And that's something I didn't understand, because I'd been involved for 3 months in recording the parts, mm-hmm. and every note was worked out, and the sound of every note was crafted.
Yep.
And obviously mixing engineers originally were balancing engineers,
yes.
because that's as much as the technology.
Because we were essentially mixing live as we recorded.
Exactly, mm-hmm. and you had 4 tracks, whatever, so there wasn't much you could do.
You had to commit.
Things had already been mixed when they were bounced together. Mm-hmm. So mixing was more about balancing, but then with the technology, bigger consoles, more outboard, suddenly mixing started to step into a different realm.
It becomes an art form.
Yeah. And you play the performance. Mm-hmm. that you've spent months capturing and crafting the sound. And that's something I didn't quite understand, because I've been on the recording of a few things, thought everything is great, everything sounds great, so I guess you put the faders up. And
now, was there automation at this point or not? Okay. Because I remember, I guess, mid-1980s, we had some of the very prehistoric automation, the NECAM and NECAM 2 and stuff like that. Yeah.
That was brutal.
Yes, but before that, one of the tricks that I thought was very interesting was that some producers would mix in sections, and then splice it all together. Because you had so many hands on the faders.
Yeah, and that's what we had to do, and that's where I really suddenly, nothing like the Deep End Rush, Permanent Wave, Spirit of Radio. It was the first song, because obviously the single had to be got done as it was back then.
Yeah.
The single had to be ready to go, and then you got on with the rest of the album.
Right.
Yeah. Sitting and realizing that we were going to be playing the faders, and sitting there, and Terry had his 10, then Geddy and Alex, and everyone just organically feeling out the best combinations, not just of what they've got in front of them, but listening
to what everyone else is doing,
and just organically, just this bond. It was absolutely beautiful. It really was. And that there'd be a moment, and me as like the newbie, and I'd have my 10 faders. I can't remember what my 10 faders were. They weren't the most important things, obviously. But suddenly, after like 4 or 5 hours of running the intro section into verse 1 or something, one of the other guys would do something different. And in like, I don't know the term, but in nanomilliseconds of whatever, in your brain you're thinking, I should push this. That was great. I should push this. But if I do, I could screw it up. I don't want to screw it up, but I should do this. And like you did or you didn't.
Yes.
But suddenly there'd be the moment, maybe after hours of like running this section of the song, and suddenly everyone would just like hold their breath and like look at each other, and then spin around and look at the tape op to make sure that the 2-track had been in record.
Yeah.
And if it was good, great. We got that section, and then it's like, oh damn, my faders are all out of whack for the verse.
Yep.
So let's have a 2-bar lead in, and let's try and move
so
our
like a
faders.
transition. Yeah.
And we can do that across the edit, because otherwise the edit isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And but it was exhilarating.
The other thing about that, though, is that because you had been in a band, you did understand the whole art of the ensemble.
Yeah.
And I think that is a valuable thing. And we'll cover this a little bit more in a moment. But I've always found it fascinating, the idea that as engineers, as producers, we really do have to be conscious of how all the aspects blend together.
Yeah.
That's the big picture view, which I think is so imperative to working with an artist, creating and crafting a track, is really understanding. And kudos to those rare people who can hear it all in their head, like Prince, or another one's Todd Rundgren,
Right.
people who can just lay it all down. I'm in awe of that when I listen to the tracks, and I think to myself, Stevie Wonder, another one, you actually thought out that drum part and played that drum part without anything else going on around it.
While you heard everything.
Exactly. And that is so fascinating. And I think that is a real art form in itself.
It really is. There are so many different methods that I've, either used myself, but initially seeing different ways of how this comes together. And in my first 4 years at Trident, I went back in 83, 84, but from January 12, 78 until the end of November in 81, which is when Trident closed, in that period I probably worked on or with 200 different producers or engineers or bands.
Each of whom had their own methodology, not to mention their own sound.
Yeah, and personalities, and various levels of ego or no visible ego, all different ways. And I just think it's incredible that I had 200 people show me what you can do, and also show me a lot of what not to do.
Yes. And that we go beyond the musical aspect of it, and we go into the psychology aspect of it, and that is
absolutely.
so very important.
Yeah, that I think, as we know, that became one of the most important parts of producing. I mean, obviously engineering, but when you start producing and you're more responsible for engaging, you know,
Yeah.
because especially back then you had to know your place, you know.
Yes.
So as the engineer, you couldn't step on the toes of the producer. That was the producer's department. More often than not, the engineer was the glue between the producer and the artist of the band. You know, the mediator, sometimes the middle person.
Not to mention the glue between the left brain, right brain, the creative aspect and the technical, which was the other real challenge, is that you're trying to keep your brain on that.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep your brain focused on, you know, the guitar player. I mean, I will never forget being asked by a guitar player, "Can you make my guitar a little more brown?" You know, and then I have to think to myself, okay, what does he mean by that? You know, and, okay, you know, it's a warm EQ. That's, you know, and that did turn out to be what he was asking for.
Yeah.
But to be able to interpret that is always such a challenge, you know.
Especially when people see, those that do see sound in different colors.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
It's not like a uniform.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of those people have different perceptions of what it's like two different monitors, you know. I mean, they have different perceptions of what that means to them, you know. And then, you know, you have all these different techniques, you know. I remember hearing a story about who was it that told me this? Oh, I think it was Ed Stasium told me he was in a session with Roy Thomas Baker watching him record the Bee Gees. And what I found fascinating about that was that they tracked each part in unison. All three voices doing the root note, then the third, then and that again is like one of those little idiosyncratic things, and you learn from that by saying, okay, is that, you know,
because that's what RTB did with Queen,
which makes perfect sense. Yes, exactly. And the idea of doing it that way, you don't realize it. You know, when you hear the end result, you don't necessarily dive into that and really figure out what it's all made of. But that's a fascinating thing. To track things that way, you know, and it obviously it not only influences the overall sound, the recorded sound, but it's got to influence the singers when they're singing.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're singing unison with somebody, it's going to be a totally different mindset.
Completely. I mean that was the technique that he used back then. And again, that a lot of those things, what we refer to as the founding fathers at Trident, it was obviously Ken Scott, who'd moved from Abbey Road.
Yes.
RTB, Tony Visconti, and then Gus Dudgeon, who had done the Elton John stuff, and is escaping me now on Genesis. But these were the guys that really created the Trident way, the Trident method.
And that, I think, is so interesting because so much of that is really, it's problem solving. You know, and I mean, Ken Scott, who I have always been in awe of, he was one of the ones who was really, really intrinsic in, you know, the whole idea of an artist coming to you, as I said, you know, a guitar player asking me to make it more brown. Can you imagine John Lennon saying, I want my voice to sound like I'm in the Himalayas and you know, all of these kind of things, and coming up with these ideas like, well, let's loop a pencil around a reel of tape out there, and you know, all of that kind of stuff is really, it's not just creative problem solving, but it's bridging that engineering mindset with the creative mindset. How do I accomplish this?
I mean, still, you know, obviously, sadly, Jeff isn't with us anymore.
I know, that's another one. But he was just brilliant with what he would come up with.
But unbelievable.
Yeah.
And still, at the time, never got really the recognition for what he was inventing, things that had never been done before, especially when he wasn't allowed to touch the mics officially.
Well, you know, it's funny because I've heard from a few people, I've heard a little bit of grousing of, you know, yes, George Martin was a genius, but, you know, he was not the only genius by any means. And, you know, that's I think really one of the most interesting parts of this is really the idea that it comes down to, how do I do this? How do I solve this problem? And it's the same thing that an artist works on when we're working on a song, you know? How do I What chords do I use? Where do I go with this melody? It's all about really, essentially, problem solving.
Yeah, a lot of the time it is.
Yeah.
Just trying to, you know, understanding that the idea that the artist has, maybe it's an idea they can't explain.
Yeah.
Trying to get their vision, their concept, the sound that they're imagining, just even the visual of the mix. When I hear a song for the first time, if someone sits and plays a song at a piano or on an acoustic guitar, I get a visual.
Yes.
I can see the spaces, the shapes. I see it in colors, and I can draw the song on of what the ideas that pop into my head on that first listen. And then it's about, okay, now I've got the plan. Now I know how the song is going to look and sound. So now let's fill in the spaces.
And sometimes it's a challenge just to make sure you don't fill it in too much.
That,
The process of elimination, let's take this part out and see how it goes,
So sometimes the greatest productions sound like they have no production.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing. At Trident, we were always told that whatever equipment we have in the control room, the other side of the glass is the performance. The gear can never get in the way of capturing what's going on in that room.
We are in the service of that artist, and every single person in that session. That's I think what I learned early on that I always felt was the most valuable lesson, was that every single person in that room, if you are not the person in front of that microphone, we are in service to you.
Yeah, and all that matters is being in record, not getting in the way, and capturing the magic.
And sometimes, especially, and you know this from being a producer as well, sometimes finding that one little idiosyncratic thing that will trigger that beautiful performance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm so much into like setting up the room, for different bands, and just setting up the atmosphere, the colors, the lighting, all of that stuff in the room. And sometimes flipping things around, telling a band that I've done this where I told the band, it was a band that liked to relax a lot while they were recording, and I said, look, this record, it's your third album. This is an important record. On the credits on the back of the album, they thanked me for making the first album that they remembered making. With this particular band, there was one song that I was trying to get, and we tried to record it 3 times during the process of the album, and I never got the laid-back feel that I needed. So one night I told them, you know what, you're not going to be playing anymore. Go to the TV room. You can chill out. You can relax. But hang around, because I just want you to hear. I'm going to be editing, but I want you to hear what I'm doing. So I left them in there for half an hour. Then I sent my assistant in just to see if they needed anything.
More rolling papers?
And she came back and I said, how are they doing it? And she said, oh, they're not baked enough yet. So I said, okay, let's give them another 15, 20 minutes. And then I went in and said, guys, I'm really sorry. I think we do need to go for this song again. For this album, I needed to be fairly strict and just like control it so we got the stuff done.
Right.
But I realized that also we weren't getting the laid back thing we needed on a certain song.
Oh, okay.
And everyone in the band, in the rhythm section of the band, everyone played a second instrument. And they used to like to jam playing each other's instruments. So when I brought them back into the studio and said, let's just try it, let's just see what happens, nothing lost. I said, but also, and they all went to their instrument, I said, can everyone just move one instrument to the left? And so it meant everyone was playing so carefully and sparingly.
Yeah.
And their perception was a little more relaxed, and we got a magic take out of that. So
funny how that sometimes just throwing a hand grenade in there makes all the difference.
And all the way through these 3 different attempts to get this backing track down, I kept thinking, I don't know what to do. How am I going to, create this situation?
Well, and that's such a valuable thing right there, being able to, I would say, read the room, read the people.
Yeah.
That was instrumental, no pun intended, in in creating this rapport with them.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because there's always a balance there between wanting to be a peer, quote unquote, but needing to be in charge.
Yeah, and let's get the thing done. But you know, when you meet a band, because you're a prospective producer for them, and they're going to put their future in your hands.
Yep. And their name's on the album, not yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Often you walk into that, and if there's 5 people in the band, you know that there's 1 or 2 who are like, we don't need an effing producer.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're going to have different relationships with each one of them.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be one who's going to absolutely love you.
Yeah.
And, 1 or 2 who are going to go,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to, I realized I have to suss that in the first 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got 5 people judging you from the minute you walked in, and you've always got to work out who are the John and Paul, who are the alphas.
Yep.
And when you establish that, you think, and who's the George?
Yes,
Who's
exactly.
the one, the quiet one who's got these killer songs and ideas?
And who's the Ringo who loves to joke around and, exactly.
Yeah, but is actually not just a joker,
Right.
but an essential part of the character. And then trying to give everyone their equal time and attention and involve everyone. And that's just down to defining the vision for that particular record.
Yes.
And then you break it down into the particular songs. And I tend to go really deep and often storyboard the songs visually. Or if the band aren't quite on that kind of in that place, then I'll do it through references. It's like, well, we've made the song. It's on Spotify. What song would you love to hear before it? And what song would you love to hear afterwards? And then that helps me, because sometimes they haven't got the terminology to explain what they're hearing.
Right. Right.
So often, and I think most producers will do that, especially a lot of mixers always use reference tracks.
Yes.
Which I always recommend people to do. And it's the same with getting to know a band, because I worked on records early on, where I was either the guy at the back of the room running the tape machine, or then I was engineering. And I'd see the producer who maybe wasn't that concerned about the personalities in the band, not that interested. He was going to make the record and wasn't really engaging the band.
Yes.
And maybe there was a second guitarist in the band, and the producer decided, well, he's not important. Let me just focus on the lead singer or whoever's writing the songs.
Yeah.
And then you'd see tension start to develop. Maybe the producer wouldn't see it because the producer wasn't naturally interested and looking for it. They had a bit of tunnel vision about what they were going to do with this record. But the minute that, the band member who wasn't being involved, and then he might have an idea and the other would go, oh, that's a crap idea, because no one had spent the time to involve him on the vision or the version or the parameters that were going to be for that particular song within the package of songs. And the next time that the drummer isn't quite getting the take, and the producer's pushing him too hard and the drummer starts to get upset, now he's got an ally with the second guitarist, and now they start forming a thing, and the fracture starts.
Yes.
And I'm sure most people know, in any kind of relationship, once there's a fracture, it's really hard to mend it back.
Yeah.
You can kind of pull it back for a limited period of time, but it's never going to be what it could have been.
Well, and part of that also has to do with whether or not you really do get into the artists as individuals, but also, and this is another aspect of that, how mature is the band as a unit?
Yeah.
Because if you're on the third album, it's a completely different aspect than if they're a brand new band, let's say going in their first album. They've got some bands will come to you fully formed, where really all you have to do is just put a nickel in and hit record.
Stay out the way.
Yeah.
Don't mess it up.
Do no harm.
Yeah. Make sure it's in record.
Exactly.
Don't mess it up.
Yeah. But then there are others with whom you really have to. I mean, I have had to play bass on a couple of albums, because the bass player couldn't cut a track, and that's not because I wanted to.
Yeah.
But you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
To make it work. Whatever that is.
There's obviously been records where I've sent the band home at night and then had a friend, session musician, turn up an hour later.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
And redo parts. I'd send the band home and say, brilliant day, all fantastic. I'm going to do some major editing tonight. And tomorrow I'll have the track for you. The band leave. 30 minutes later, hour later, session player turns up, we redo the basses or whatever it is.
You can get away with it with certain bass lines and maybe a drum part.
And then the next day, the morning the band come in, and you know, I'd play. I said I did some major stuff last night that I think it sounds really solid, and like play the track, and the bass player will be,
yeah,
like that.
Damn, I played that really good.
Yeah, and there's things in there that.
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't matter as long as you're not being disrespectful to people.
Well, and that's just it. That's the other part I was just going to mention is we still have to have respect for their creation.
Yeah, exactly. And also understanding and explaining to the band that live is different from studio. Not always. Of course, some of the best records, rock records in that era, which is what we started talking about, now it's kind of like amazing to think that bands would turn up maybe without songs finished. Mm-hmm. And maybe there wasn't a single which they would write during the making of the album.
Mm-hmm. And then cut 5-6 tracks in a day.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other part of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean that kind of, you know, way to work just isn't viable anymore, really.
Well, and that's a nice segue into that. That's a very nice segue into that, because that's part of what I think has really changed. And for you as a producer and as an educator, there's so much that has changed in terms of the technology that has impacted the whole creative chain of events, shall we say. You know, the fact that, yes, back then you could maybe go back and track somebody else. Now, you can cut and paste the entire performance. You can splice a vocal within an inch of its life out of 27 takes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, syllable by syllable.
Yeah, and that definitely changes the whole. Yeah. Not only the final product, but it changes the methodology with which we're creating.
Yeah, you know, but back then, you know, you do a few vocal takes. You couldn't do loads because you only had a 24 track.
Right.
If you were lucky.
You might have 4 or 5 tracks for a vocal.
Or often, you know, you'd make a slave reel, bounce down drums to mono. You know, you might start with a stereo drum track, but then you'd mix that down again to a mono as you needed to free up.
Right.
So I mean, that's what any band, Queen, whatever, would do. Make a sub mix, and then use a load more tracks, then mix them down, and certainly worked on records like that. The first band that I had a hit with, producer-wise, was a band called the Blow Monkeys, a song called Digging Your Scene. The album's just down there.
I still turn that up when I hear it.
Yeah. Initially, I was the engineer on it, and the producer had just come off a big record with a big artist that had been a long time in the studio. And after the first couple of days, he saw that me and the lead singer, Dr. Robert, were kind of like similar kind of people. We're hitting it off. And he said to me, you know what, I'm so burnt out, I'm so fried, I don't think I can do this. If I talk to the label, would you take over? And that was my first chance of like, it was the first time of officially producing for a major label. And so I took over and I had the chat with Dr. Robert, and he said, you know, just one request. And I said, what? And he said, never tell me that I have to sing a song. And if I do have to sing a vocal, when I decide, I'll sing it 3 times, and that's it. And I thought, you bastard. I thought, what? You know, I've seen some egos around, but, you know, thank you for my first, you know, production.
Hey, comes with the territory, right?
Right. But I realized, you know, so obviously we talked about it more. And he said, look, for one, if you tell me that I now have to go on the microphone and put down a vocal that I will live with for the rest of my life, he said, nothing will come out. And he said, to be honest, you know, attention-wise, once I've sung it 3 times, I lose interest, you know.
That's fair.
So I thought, okay, he's not being a complete what's it. You know, there's actually real personal validation.
There are valid reasons for it, sure.
Yeah. So in terms of like comping vocals and stuff, so we do the songs. I'd always make sure I had 3 tracks available. From day one, we did a vocal mic shootout, which I still do. Found out which 1 or 2 mics were the choices for different vibes on different songs. And then that mic was set up. The compressor was set up. The channel was left. that mic
always at the ready.
always
basically.
at the ready.
Uh-huh.
Beginning of the day, turn the power supply for the mic on. Probably it was a 67 or a Tube 47. Turn it on and just have it ready. And he'd say, I said, as long as we're not in the middle of like a drum take, a rhythm section, or I'm doing strings, anytime you want to sing any of the songs on the album, just let me know. We'll do 3 takes. We won't listen back, and that'll be it.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we did. He put 3 takes down. At the end of the night, I'd listen to the 3 takes, and back then cross-patching, and the track you comped on couldn't be adjacent to the 3 you'd recorded on, because
Right.
you'd get like feedback or crosstalk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd patch across for 1 word, 1 syllable, punch in, punch out, compile the vocal. So I'd have the best version so far. Then we'd get other songs done. So without telling him, sometimes when I knew that there was a song that we needed to revisit some of the vocal, I would, a few days later, I'd say, well, but I think we should try some percussion or, an extra guitar on that tune. Let me just put it up.
Just so you'd have it at the ready.
Yeah, and he'd hear it, because I knew he'd hear it. And he'd go, can I take a quick pop at that vocal? And I go, perfect, yeah, there's 3 tracks. And at the end of that night, he'd be gone. I'd listen through the 3 new takes. Anything that was better than the one before, the comp before,
Pop it in there,
cross patch, put that in. We got to the end of the album, we had 12 songs done. I'd never had to tell him once, you now have to sing this song.
Well, and that's learning how to communicate with not just the artist, but the human.
Yeah.
And that's an art form in itself, just understanding human communication.
Yeah.
I feel is such a valuable thing, and it's something you can't teach.
And that doesn't change from 46 years ago
Exactly.
to working with artists now.
That is the constant. It's the fact that we are creative humans.
Yeah.
And however we choose to do that, it doesn't change.
What I love in a lot of people that have come through our era when we started, and I remember I was like, we were all so competitive. All the time you wanted to know what your rivals were doing, which, you wanted to get a certain record so they didn't.
And not only that, but if they were in the same studio you were, you always wanted to kind of listen at the door,
the door.
Oh, somebody's coming out. Wait a minute, let me hear what's going on.
I was producing a pop band in the UK before I moved to LA, and I'd said to the label, it was a boy band, and I said, I'm happy to make this record, but I want to make a classy pop record. It's going to be a bit more sophisticated. I think I phoned around town to find who was in which studios, and I think I booked the middle room at Townhouse in West London back then, because I knew that Tears for Fears were in the room to the right doing Sowing the Seeds of Love, and Freddie Mercury was down doing his last album.
Good company.
Yeah, and I thought that should put the band into a frame of mind where they also want to be serious about making a quality record.
Yes.
So often those kind of manipulations, I say to my students, part of the art of being a producer is about manipulating. And
in a positive way, yes. That word has negative connotations, but it is absolutely true.
Well, that's the thing. You can manipulate people because you're an evil bastard and you want to rule the world, or you can do it in a way to get the best out of them and to help them achieve what they want to achieve. But
and a lot of times that's what it really is down to. Is just understanding what does this situation need. And that's such an art form in itself. I mean, I will never forget being in the back of the room for a Phil Ramone session.
Right.
And watching him, there was a little bit of tension in the room. I don't know I don't really recall what it was, but just watching the way he just got everybody onto this level of, everything's great, everything's cool, no problem, and there was just something about it, because it wasn't anything in particular that he did. It was just this kind of looking at each individual person as the entire person, and understanding them, and understanding, as you said, if you blow off the rhythm guitar player, there was no one that he blew off. Everyone was important. And that, I think, is so intrinsic to getting everyone on the same page.
It's about team building.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. That it's funny when you look back on things, but like when I was at elementary school and even at grammar school in England, high school kind of equivalent, I was often like the captain of sports. I wasn't always the best player on the team or the different teams, but the rest of like the students would vote who the captain would be, and often I was, because it seems I had a way of pulling people together, the sum of the parts, and being able to motivate people individually, not by shouting at them and calling them names, but by showing them that I believed in them and giving them a chance. And that became so essential. That's almost like the most important personal trait.
It's more important than being the best player.
Yeah.
And that goes for music as well. A lot of times the really wonderful players are not necessarily the best leaders.
Yeah.
Because they are too inside themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just fascinating how those things which you're not even aware of earlier in life become the essential things to do to be the role of the producer. And with an artist or a band, you have to earn their respect. Every record starts, hopefully, at a 0 point, not a negative.
Hopefully.
Sometimes you can start at a negative because a lot of young, emerging artists have been burnt by producers who were lower on the awareness or the ability level. So often I'd be coming into situations, and unfortunately I got a reputation as being really good with first-time bands, new bands signed to labels, because I guess I had a nurturing thing. And often they've been burnt by an experience. So sometimes you're coming in from at a negative, and you've got to work to get it up to an even kind of like level before you can start to get a positive response from them. And you can never go into a, if you've got an idea for a band about their music and you want to change something in one of their songs and they go, why? You can't go, are you kidding? Have you seen who I've worked with?
No.
That's,
But the best thing is to get them to just be willing to try it. And that is, so many times somebody will say, nah, that's a shit idea, and they just won't try it.
Yeah.
It takes less time to try it and listen to it. And then if it's a shit idea, everyone will know it.
Yeah, one of the best stages, if I'm working with a band, is in the rehearsals, if it's a live thing.
Yeah.
Because you can try those things. It takes 15 seconds. That you've restructured the song, you want the band to try it out. They're playing it in a rehearsal room, or it can be in your lounge. It doesn't matter these days. But they're playing the song, and someone screws up. The bass player goes to the wrong change in the wrong part, and the drummer throws a stick and go, you effing tosser, you screwed it up again. And I go, but hang on a minute, that was kind of cool. Oh, my bad, I messed up. Let's just try it again. No, but it takes 15 seconds. Let's just try it again and see. And either it's like, no, you are an idiot. That, or that could be really interesting.
Yeah.
But maybe not this point in the song, but the next time that section comes up, let's not repeat what we did. Let's do something different first.
Yeah.
And that experimentation and creating an environment where people feel it's okay to experiment, and it's okay if they mess up while they're learning the song. But that, for me, like that pre-production stage is one of the most magical stages of it.
Yes.
And you mentioned Phil Ramone. I had an incredible experience. It was doing the soundtrack for the film White Nights, which was with Mikhail Baryshnikov and Gregory Hines, about the CIA getting an American dancer to recruit the Russian dancer and get him to move to the West, and which was very much 80s kind of, and before. And for the session, for the Baryshnikov stuff, I was in the control room with Phil Ramone. They'd come to use the Trident piano because Hey Jude, the White Album, Life on Mars, Ziggy Stardust, You're So Vain, Nilsson Without You, etc.
Yeah.
The
charmed piano.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm in the upstairs control room looking down. I've got Phil Ramone in the room with me. Looking down, we had Rod Argent, who was always our go-to from the Zombies. He was always our go-to keyboard player.
Amazing keyboard player, yeah.
And lovely guy. So Rod was in there playing piano. Taylor Hackford, the director, was downstairs next to Rod with his stopwatch, and Twyla Tharp, who'd done the choreography for the film, was dancing in the studio to get the pacing, and Rod is looking at Taylor Hackford and he's looking at Twyla Tharp while he's playing what was Baryshnikov's like solo piece. And I'm upstairs in the control room recording loads of different takes of the piano on 24 track, and then Phil Ramon's taking his notes, and then it was done, and it's like, okay, let's edit the first X amount of bars from take 13, then I want to go to 21 for 4, and I was splicing the 24 track, cutting on like the harmonic sustain of piano notes. With Phil Ramone there, and it was just amazing. The whole experience was amazing. Being in his presence was amazing. I'd never met him before.
It was like a Yoda.
Yeah,
it really was.
Really was, and just the way that he had his presence, and without saying anything, just brought everything down to being okay.
Yeah.
And calmed everything, and it was actually really enjoyable and trying things, and I got away with it, which is what we've all been doing for all these years.
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to the technology question for a moment, because one of the things that I am fascinated by is what you did with so little, and comparing it to now. And I'm not just talking about the idea that now we do everything digitally and we have an undo key and all of that stuff, and you don't have to worry about splicing with razor blades. I'm also talking about the broadness of the palettes that we have now. Jimi Hendrix, how many pedals did he have?
Yeah.
And how many pedals does any average guitar player have now? How many synth sounds did you have in the 1980s versus what we have now?
Yeah.
And it's there's a certain power to limitations.
Yeah.
In that, because we have those limitations, we have to do that problem solving we were talking about.
Yeah.
How has that impacted not only your creative process now as a producer, but also your teaching of this? Because now we have so many choices. Is there more of a paralysis of analysis, so to speak?
The essential, especially when I'm teaching the art of music production at UCLA Herb Alpert, and also I've done masterclasses at Berkeley, Valencia, the postgrad in Valencia, Spain. The things learnt back then, I mean, as you say, you have everything at your fingertips. You are swamped with toys and effects and presets. So if you don't have I still tell people to experiment, but if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a concept of how you want the song to feel, if you haven't thought about, do I want a big production? Do I want small? Do I want the voice to be out front, intimate? Do I want it double tracked and swamped in reverb and have a real dreamy shoegazer kind of song, or whatever style of song is this going to be? If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a concept, if you don't talk that through with the artist and get everyone on the same page, be open to ideas, then it doesn't matter what you're using, what era you're in, you're not going to get a version of the song where the artist goes, that sounds how I wanted it to feel.
Well, and that's just it, because the less of an idea you have going in, the more of those potential rabbit holes there are.
Right.
Oh, let me sit here and play with synth sounds for the next 20 hours, things like that.
And of course, the random thing can be fantastic. The accident can be great. We all know that.
We all want those.
Right. But something you mentioned early on, you can teach a new dog old tricks. That's what I say. So for like the new music makers, you can apply the old tricks. Tape delays. Yeah. You said round the pencil.
Yeah.
I'd be like assisting Mike. We'd be on whatever album it was, Mike Stone, and as well as the 2-track that we recorded the mixes onto from the console, we had 4 or 5 other 2-track machines. Generally, they were like 1/4 inch, and they'd be at 7.5 or 15 or 30.
For a slapback kind of thing?
Yeah. And different kind of delays, whatever it was. And the tape would be pulled off the record head around a mic stand and then go back to the playback. And, you know, Mike would say, you know, pull it out a bit more. Go, no, too much. Let it back in, you know, a couple of inches. That's, okay, find it. And the thing is, we weren't working things out by algorithms, you know.
No.
It was much later that we had digital delays, and I had a chart of what the delay times were in my file of facts, which was that thing.
But before that, we were just doing it by ear.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, that was part of the magic. And this is what I shared like as a teacher as well. Part of the magic was that things weren't perfect.
Yeah.
It was done by feel. What I think is amazing, I love the Sound Toys stuff. I was one of the first people, I gave Echo Boy credits on albums. It was, but Echo Boy is amazing because they understand that. When you pull up the delay, and I show this, they have a button, one dial which says, I think, groove, the other says feel.
Oh, I love it.
And you can have it push in or drag in. So you can set your MIDI or your tempo BPM thing so the delay will be in time with the track, but then you can make it a bit later, a bit behind the beat, or you can pull it up a bit front. And that's what we were doing when deciding where is the mic stand. We weren't getting a tape measure out to calculate how much tape should be traveling to get a certain, you know, 16th at 75 BPM, whatever it was. It was just by ear and by feel. Sometimes it would feel better to have it a bit behind, a bit lazy, sometimes in front. So the technology is now at your fingertips. So what I love doing is like sharing that kind of information. Back then you'd have like the 4 different machines and it was like spinning plates. And then the panic of when should I put a fresh reel on? It's starting to sound really dull, but if I put a fresh reel, it's going to be really bright, then it's going to be too loud for everything that they've been learning.
Just watching everything over your shoulder.
And it really was like spinning plates kind of thing on sticks. But there's a way that you can take all of that old stuff and apply it to the new. And that's the thing that young or new emerging music makers aren't necessarily aware of those ways to humanize your music.
Yes.
When we're working in the box, and here I am, you know, working in the box most of the time, I can record pretty much above an 8-piece quartet. Here would be tricky, but I can record pretty much everything in this house.
And do you encourage people to play together?
Oh yeah,
because that's the other aspect of it that's always so amazing to me is how many younger people have not been fortunate enough to have that experience of actually playing with other people. That makes a difference too.
And even back in the day, you'd have the band playing live, but you knew you had to get the drum track down. You'd isolate as best as you could, but the essential was let's get the drums, hopefully the bass is good, and then we'll come back, you know, we'll do some punches on the bass,
else.
And we do the stuff, but we'll do it quickly once we've got the magic take.
Right, and if you're lucky, maybe you might get to keep one of the scratch vocals.
Yeah.
But again, it's only if it's an accident in that sense, you know. And that, I think, is really the understanding of that magic that happens there. That's what I wonder if we sometimes lose by having too much choice.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if you don't have a plan, because all the emerging music makers and my students who are music makers, they all want to make something that feels good.
Yeah.
Or it feels sincere to what they were feeling when they had the song. When I'm working with an artist, if they've written a song which, you know, unfortunately the best songs generally come from dark places. You know, one of the worst things you can have is have your lead singer who madly in love, because that's going to be horrible.
Yep. Then they're going to be happy.
No, we don't do happy. No.
I want the divorce album.
Yeah, exactly. All artists want their music to touch someone, whatever emotion they're going for. If it is happy, they, you know, it's your job as the producer to get that person in the right frame of mind where they deliver the vocal that is convincing. Because if music isn't convincing, people realize people aren't dummies, and people will listen to something else.
And even if they don't realize why, they just, you know, I don't like it. You know,
Yeah.
it's not. Well, it's because the snare is too loud. No, it's just
Yeah.
it's a subconscious thing.
In my classes, one of the assignments, I have students pick 3 songs that just do it for them.
Uh-huh.
And I say, you know, songs that make you happy, sad, melancholic, reflective. You know, if it's punk, it probably makes you want to walk out and punch someone in the face, but hopefully that's not it. But however these songs make you feel, try and figure out what is it, not just the vocal and the lyric. Walk into the song, reverse engineer it, walk around the singer, stand in the middle of the instruments, and try and figure out, it's not just the bass notes, it's the sound of those notes which are creating the emotion.
And how they're vibing with the drums and all of these different aspects.
And then how all those elements work together. And that stuff is timeless. When I work with new artists, I'll step into that a little bit. But with my students, they just absolutely love that concept, and they'll come back and, you know, they'll do the assignment and explain what they discover, but they'll come back and say, you know, I never realized this was going on in that song. I've always loved the song. It always makes me feel this certain way, but now I've discovered the combination of the parts and how they come together and just how that works.
Yeah.
So one of the real beauties, I think, is for people like us, is coming from the era that we did, learning from the people that we did, learning from ourselves, learning from our own mistakes, as well as watching mistakes of others. But then being able to bring that into the new world, because you can find, and I tell my students, I'm not going to really teach you how to use compressors. That's not what I'm about. It's much more conceptual, about the art of making music. If you want to learn how to use a compressor, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. You can look at any plug-in company, they will have tutorials on.
It's funny, that's exactly what I've done with my students as well. It's not, you can teach how to use gear. That's easy enough, but I think it's so much more important to be able to teach that aspect of the creative process.
What I will do is then I'll say, you know, here's the vocal, listen, or a violin, listen to this compressor on it, see how that changes the character. If it's changing the frequencies, is that changing your emotional response to the notes that are being played? And how is that coloring the sound? So again, that's in the creative emotional response kind of thing.
Reverse engineering, that's how you just put it a moment ago. That's really what it is. You know? And even down to, I remember one of the tracks that I used to like to play for my students was, 2 tracks actually, Mitchell Froom stuff. You know?
Beautiful.
And I love the stuff. There's a Crowded House track where he uses a little toy piano on the top, you know, and you don't notice it until you notice it, and then you can't not notice it, you know. And little stuff like that, I think, is so important because we don't realize how much those little things, if you bury them right in the mix, they don't really, you know, it's like putting too much spice in something. You know, you don't want to do that, but if you just add a little tiny touch, it really makes the difference.
I've forgotten what song it is. It's one of the Crowded House things where they're using a plastic Woolworths guitar as well. That kind of stuff. And it's not just being quirky for the sake of it. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be on the song. But having that kind of imagination, and again, that's what I always want to bring through, is we've got all of this stuff. You can now do whatever you want. And I told them with MIDI, it's like I play them songs where I've done like a brass band in MIDI, and I'll show them the same if I'm doing MIDI strings. I'll do one instrument at a time, and with the brass band, I explain to them, visualize the band. Who are the people in the band? And I said, okay, it's the Salvation Army band. They play on Saturdays in the shopping area with the wooden box, you know, for donations, whatever. The leader of the Salvation Army band is this guy in his 70s, and he has, you know, a boring job during the week, his trombone, and this is his thing. This is his moment where he makes his statement about his life, and he runs that band, and he's proud, and he plays that trombone strong. And the second trombone is the 17-year-old kid, you know, who really one day wants to be like that guy, but is completely intimidated by him. So he always plays softer on the trombone, always plays slightly behind because he's always hesitant. So let's do the MIDI of trombone 1. Let's get a bright sound. Let's play it. Let's get it punching on the beat. Now let's do trombone 2. Let's take the attack off the sound, go into my contact library, get a different trombone, treat it differently, play the MIDI slightly hesitantly behind with a softer sound, and then who are the other characters? Let's visualize and have some fun.
You reminded me of something that it's a conversation I've had a number of times with people about visualizing the music. It's almost like directing a movie.
Absolutely.
You are really getting the entire image, and I want to think about who this character is, and it can be in recording a number of songs with the same artist. It can be different each time. Who's the character? Who is the protagonist in this song? Tell me about them. And that kind of thing, to work that out before you actually get in there during the pre-production phase, which I think is the most, I agree with you, the most important phase, to work all that stuff out will then give you a completely different palette of colors when you're actually recording it.
And with students as well, I'll say, okay, if you want to do a quartet or you want to do an oboe in MIDI, spend 2 or 3 hours, watch clips of an oboe player. Listen to the instrument, listen to different players using the instrument in different ways. Maybe see how it's recorded.
But watching them too, that's a good point, because then you're really you're watching their body as they play that instrument.
And you're understanding the role of the instrument and how versatile it can be. And if, when I started at Trident after the rock era, it then went into the disco period, which meant every week we were recording an orchestra 2 or 3 times a week. It was amazing, with the finest session people. The Brecker brothers were being flown from New York to London to do sessions, which was amazing. Michael Brecker's one of the 3 people that made me want to do music. But if you want to be doing a quartet, then listen to quartets and then do the MIDI one at a time. And that's the thing of like bringing the old to the new. We would be in the situations, and we've probably recorded a lot of instruments. We've listened to them from close up and tried to figure out what microphone is going to capture the right version of the sound of this instrument in this context. Do I want it harsh and brittle and gnarly, or do I want it really warm where I'm going to use an M49 or a ribbon or something to take the edge off and warm it out? Because the player's really harsh, so let me get something to warm this out, because that sound isn't going to work for the emotion of the song. So that's something that I share a lot, because if you've got it all at your fingertips, how do you make those decisions?
That's it, exactly.
I'll say one of the biggest roles and challenges in being a producer is the decision making. When to know. You can always add another idea. You can always keep adding.
Ideas are cheap. It's picking the right one and what you do with it and all of that. Absolutely.
And if you don't have a plan about what you're trying to achieve, because the thing is as well, it's like if you're in tune with the song, you can always have more ideas. And then I would do this where I thought, I've got another idea. Well, I'm in tune with the song, so if I've had an idea and it's an impulsive emotional reaction to the song, it must be good. It must work, because I've got another response. So I'd put another thing down, then put another thing down. And then you end up with a song which is like, okay, we've got a song, it's got musical parts, it's got all the bits, it's got structure to it, but it doesn't feel the way we intended it.
And that's what I said earlier about pulling stuff out.
And then you start to strip it down and start, which used to be the horrific thing on a mix. And I share this with my students as well. The bit on a mix where you realize it's just not working, and you've been on it for like 3 days on a console, and it's like, oh my God. Or you're the engineer and the producer says, all right, pull all the faders down, put the kick drum up.
Let's start from the bottom.
Again. But that kind of process with my students, one of the biggest things I tell them, get away from the computer, stand up, walk away, grab your phone, and do voice memos. Just sing random ideas, free form it, just try ideas, free yourself up from what you started with. Because these days of obviously working in the box, generally music makers, the first version that they start with is the master version. There isn't a pre-version, there isn't a demo.
Right.
That becomes the master. So I'm always telling artists, just like, first of all, have a template. Just have a session that you can pull up in whatever DAW you're using. Have your favorite drum machine and your favorite drum samples. Have your favorite electric bass sound and a synth bass.
Like an artist with your favorite sketch tool.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. So just have that, so that when you get this random idea that came from nowhere, hopefully it came from the gods or channeled John Lennon or whoever it was, but wherever this idea came from, get down, grab your phone, put your voice memos down. My phone, I would be locked up as a raving lunatic if someone heard the voice memos. I'm singing these ideas and, you know, and then all the
Usually driving in the car while you're doing it. Yeah.
But I took, get those ideas down. Don't go, oh, I've got this killer idea. Oh man, this is the one that's going to do it.
I'm going to remember this.
Yeah.
Sure you are.
Yeah. How many times?
Oh, yeah.
How many times on the drive home?
Right.
Like an hour or 2 hours singing over and over, trying to remember the idea. You walk in the door, someone says, hi, boom, it's gone.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So get the initial ideas down. And I tell people as well, make a note about where you are, what you're doing. Maybe it's the first day of summer and you're driving to the beach for the first time, you know, and you've got the windows open and you can smell the sea breeze coming in. Maybe it's just rained and in LA suddenly the sky is incredibly clear, you know, and beautiful. Maybe you just had an argument with someone that you care about, you know, because it might be 2 years before you record that song. And what you need to do is put yourself back emotionally into the reference point of what was going on, so that you can place yourself back in there. And I'll do that with artists. If we're coming to a song and maybe it's a heavy song, a sad song, and you know the artist will start singing the song and I'm not feeling the depth of what I'm reading off my vocal comp sheet, you know, and I'm not feeling what the words say, you know, I'll let the singer sing it a few times, then I'll say, let's take a break for a minute and I'll have a chat, and I'll say to the singer, tell me a bit about what was going on when you wrote this. And he goes, oh, it's a pretty bad time, you know. I said, yeah, but, you know, I need to hear that. Unfortunately, we need to go back in time. We need to go back into the moment, because that's why you got this idea in the first place. And let's represent that emotion. And, you know, if it is a heavy place, then I'll make sure that, you know, a few hours later, some friends are going to arrive at the studio, or something.
Pull them back out again.
And pull them out. Or if I have to get them angry because it was an angry song and they're not angry, you know, I've got to get, I've got to get them worked up.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and
I've stood in front of the drummer and, you know, jumped up and down with him to get him to, you know, absolutely. You do what you have to do.
To get a convincing, honest performance. Often when I'm recording a band, once I've got all the sounds up, and obviously we've done pre-production, we know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. We've tried every drum fill in rehearsals that the drummer wanted. I explained it wasn't a solo. You know, it's actually a song. And the drummer might play a killer fill, but it might be too soon. I say, that is killer, that's amazing, but let's put that coming out of chorus too. You know. And so when you get to the studio, no one feels cheated, because everyone has tried every idea. They know that what you're going in with is the best version of everything. And then it's about capturing the best performance. Often I'll be in the room with the band, often conducting a little bit. There might be a pause that you just want a hold or cut out before the drop comes back. And you might just want a breath, but you might not want it to be on the grid. You might want a breath and a fraction that you couldn't even write if you were writing parts. And so often I'll be in there and just conducting the performance on the back, not getting in the way, but
encouraging.
And I've done that sitting in front of the drummer, literally sitting in front of the drummer. You know.
I think stuff like that is really important to getting that extra little bit out of the artist.
And as long as you're doing it in a positive way and a respectful way, and you're helping people be better than they thought they could even be. As long as you're doing that with it, coming from a good place. You know, I've seen producers just destroy the artist because the producer's ego is out of control with some really famous people, with some superstars. And the producer decided the only way that they were going to have control over the superstar was if they took them down every day. And it's been miserable, and especially when you're in the room, because they're using you as an accomplice. You know, for leverage. Basically. And I've seen some awful stuff. We all have.
Yeah, we have. We have.
But
all right, so let me, you know, I usually wrap with this particular question, and in your case, it's very, very poignant because of how much you do with younger artists and younger students. You and I came up in a completely different era, both technologically speaking, creatively speaking, and just in terms of what's available to sign an artist to, the way people consume music. Everything has changed culturally. What would you tell 15-year-old you coming up in this particular environment now?
Stay true to yourself. One of the most important things as a person, when I was immersed in this world of absolute out of control excess, I think it was the only thing that actually kept me from, you know, going over the brink, was remembering where I came from and remembering the kind of person I wanted to be. I tell my students, I mean, telling my 15-year-old something, it would be, you have no idea what this journey is going to be like. And you're going to learn things that you thought you would never be able to do. You'll break through barriers where you thought you absolutely had absolute concrete walls of limitations. But you can learn anything if you apply yourself and if you resonate with it, of course. Because at school I had trouble learning anything because nothing seemed relevant to me apart from the languages thing. So telling the 15-year-old it's always amazing, because in a way I wouldn't want to go back and interfere with that 15-year-old, because that's how I got to be the 66-year-old.
Of course.
You know. So it's really interesting. But again, I think what most people say is like, buckle up.
Well, and you know, it's easy to say be true to yourself, and you know, then we look back and we think, well, I had no idea who I was to be true to. But I think you're right in that really sticking with knowing who you are
and who you want to
and
be.
Who you want to be. I think that's great advice right there.
Yeah, I think so. And again, that's what I share. Some of the most successful artists I've worked with were the ones who would just be normal people in, you know, living a normal life. It'd be in the studio, creating something which didn't exist yet. And by the end of the day, that thing existed a bit more and existed a bit more. And then I'd get to work closely with these people. They do a show, and it might be Wembley Arena, you know, or the Coliseum here, or whatever huge venue. And maybe I'd see them a few minutes, you know, 15, 20 minutes before they went up on stage, then get to my seat outside and see them walk on stage and step into this persona. The yeah-yeah-yeahs, like that, just absolutely phenomenal on stage, just larger than life, and really giving it some, you know, just amazing. And then they'll come off stage, give them 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes just to like settle back in and go back, and they're back to being their normal, maybe humble, but really nice. They're the ones that survive. And as we know, the ones who try and live life as if you're in front of 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 people, try and live life like that, that's unfortunately where people come unstuck.
Well, it's not sustainable.
No, and that's why, again, it comes down to being true to yourself. And the best artists I've worked with, I think that's the one common thread. you know.
Yeah, it's true. Adam Moseley, thank you for being my guest. It's
Absolutely.
been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. Great fun.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.